Not every rifle is worth owning, no matter how tempting the price or reputation might be. Some models are plagued with safety concerns, unreliable designs, or maintenance nightmares that make them more of a headache than a worthwhile investment. In this video, we'll talk about 8 rifles you should avoid at all costs for a lot of possible reasons. Bad engineering, manufacturing shortcuts, unexpected discharges, etc. We'll dive into why these guns will never be the smart purchase you thought they were. Real quick, before we jump in, we just want to say a big thank you for all the love and support. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so we can keep bringing you more of these human-made videos. Alright, let's get started. Ruger Model 44 Deerstalker. The Ruger Model 44 Deerstalker can really be appealing if you see one at a low price, and that's understandable. It's a compact carbine that came out in 1961, originally chambered in .44 Magnum. On paper, it has the right stuff for close-range hunting. Not too heavy, not too large, and designed for gas operation. People often say it handles well and can group about 3 inches at 100 yards. That's not half bad for a vintage semi-auto carbine. Things started going south almost as soon as it was released. For one, the name Deerstalker was already taken by Ithaca for a slug gun, so Ruger ended up having to change it. That's a minor problem though. The real headaches came from its gas system. Firing lead bullets can clog up the gas port, which kills reliability if you don't constantly clean it. The rifle wants full power, jacketed .44 Magnum loads and doesn't cycle well with weaker ammo, so you don't have that much flexibility. It gets worse. The tubular magazine easily accumulates grease and residue and is tough to get rid of because you can't fully take it apart. If you ask me, a hunting rifle that's fussy about ammo and demands a lot of your time for cleaning is already behind the curve. Then there's the most serious flaw. The aluminum trigger housing can crack over time. Once it does, you're out of luck because it's not something you can just weld and move on. This goes beyond the usual maintenance annoyances. You're basically stuck with a broken rifle that can't be cost-effectively repaired. People still tinker with these Deerstalkers, and you'll find some conversions into weird, tactical platforms. I get why they're interesting from a historical standpoint, but you're better off avoiding them if you want a reliable .44 Magnum rifle. Unless you're prepared to nurse one along and keep an eye on that trigger housing, this is probably not the best rifle to count on. Remington 700 pre-2014. You've very likely heard of the Remington 700. It's one of the most widespread bolt-action rifles in America, if not the entire world. It came out in the early 1960s as an update to previous Remington bolt guns, and it's been offered in just about every caliber you can imagine. Plenty of folks use it for hunting, and the military got so comfortable with it that some versions, like the M24 and M40, still show up with snipers in various branches. The action itself is generally strong and has proven itself for decades. Sounds fantastic, right? There's a big catch. Pre-2014 Remington 700s might have a trigger design defect that can cause unexpected discharges when the safety is clicked off. Yes, even if you haven't touched that trigger. That's not an internet rumor. It showed up in lawsuits and resulted in a massive recall. Remington ended up having to replace millions of triggers. Some folks claim it's only a tiny fraction of these rifles that misbehave, and that might be true statistically. Unfortunately, rare isn't much comfort if your rifle goes off by itself. There were injuries and there were deaths. If you ever pick up a Remington 700, check to see if it has a little letter V on the trigger assembly. That indicates it might have the fix. If it doesn't, you'll want to see a gunsmith about installing a reliable aftermarket trigger, like a Timney with a built-in safety. Remington still denies the triggers were flawed, and that's one reason the company faced all kinds of financial issues, paying out settlements for lawsuits. It's a shame because the 700's action is famously accurate, and there's a reason why so many law enforcement and military snipers used it. Now, if you already have one from before 2014, don't think I'm suggesting you toss it. All I'm saying is you should make absolutely sure it's been addressed. If you're thinking about buying a used one, assume you need to replace the trigger if you don't see proof of the recall work. Better safe than sorry, with a rifle that's known to discharge unexpectedly. Winslow rifles. Winslow rifles were made between 1963 and 1996, originally in Florida and then in South California. They were built on commercial Mauser actions with premium Douglas barrels and blind magazines. If you ever see one, you'll notice how over-the-top they are in appearance. They had a special bluing process that gave them a ridiculously deep, glossy finish, and the fancy stocks came in 3 main styles with multiple levels of ornamentation. Some were loaded with basket weave carving, gold inlays, or exotic ivory on ebony designs. They can look like art pieces or props from a sci-fi show, depending on the model. These rifles were meticulously crafted, and the people behind them obviously had talent. The problem is that all this extravagant makes them pretty lousy for everyday use. They're very heavy, and that shiny finish will catch a glare and probably scare off game before you can even get in range. It's like having a nice sports car you're afraid to drive on a dirt road. Because the top-tier Winslows fetch high prices in the collector's market, you'll likely pay more than you would for a dependable hunting rifle that can handle scratches or dings without making you cry. If you're a gun collector and have money to burn on a Safe Queen or a showpiece, you might love a Winslow. Otherwise, think carefully before you commit to something that's too gorgeous and too heavy to be practical. Winchester Model 94, post-1964. The Winchester Model 94 is a legendary lever gun with a history that goes back to the late 1800s. Most folks know it as the quintessential deer gun, the classic woods rifle that's fast to the shoulder and perfect for medium game. The issue is that not all Model 94s are created equal, and the ones made after 1964 are the ones you might want to dodge. In 1964, Winchester cut production costs by using a lot more stamped metal and powdered metal parts instead of the old machined steel. They also changed the receiver metal, which wouldn't take the traditional bluing job properly. That gave some of these rifles a funny purplish tint, and the overall finish looked cheap. Collectors hated it. Hunters noticed that the new stamp parts sometimes bent or caused malfunctions, and the wood wasn't the same high quality as before. The older version, often called the pre-64 Model 94, had a solid reputation for durability and beautiful craftsmanship, while the later production runs were widely considered a letdown. Winchester tried to do damage control in the 1970s and 1980s by reinstating some machined parts and improving the finish. They released angle eject models that made mounting a scope easier. Those changes helped it a bit, but the older guns still remained more desirable because of their robust construction. If you decide you can't live without a Model 94, I suggest looking for one made before 1964, or at least checking how well the later model is built. The post-1964 rifles might look cheaper and feel that way too. Some are better than others, but collectors often turn their noses up at them, and for good reason. Century Arms C39 V2. When someone mentions an American-made AK-style rifle, the Century Arms C39 V2 might come up. You might even hear good things from casual owners who plink a bit at the range. Once you dig deeper though, you'll find a lot of evidence that this rifle isn't as rugged as a proper AK should be. It's built with cast parts rather than forged ones, and the quality control is hit or miss. Tests have shown that the receiver can develop cracks around the locking lugs in relatively few rounds. There have been instances of people shooting a few thousand rounds, then finding disturbing fractures in critical areas. That's one of those stop shooting immediately scenarios, and it's not what you want to deal with in a platform that's supposed to be known for reliability. Headspace issues often pop up because of poor machining tolerances, and these rifles can start failing no-go gauges faster than they should. Eventually, you might be dealing with a potential catastrophic failure if headspace gets far enough out of spec. Some owners complain about cheap wooden furniture that loosens up, or mismatched metal surfaces that wear unevenly. When you add it all up, it doesn't sound like a rifle you want to depend on. A decent AK clone can be an outstanding do-it-all rifle, but the C39 V2 will let you down. I'd steer you towards something from Zastava or maybe a Romanian import if you want a rugged AK for roughly the same price range. The C39 V2's track record is just too shaky to recommend. Savage Model 340. The Savage Model 340 is a bolt-action rifle that first appeared at a bargain price, around $60, and that was decades ago. It remained on the market until 1985. On one hand, it's an interesting piece of history because it gave plenty of people their first centerfire rifle. On the other hand, you'll notice right away it's riddled with budget-driven shortcomings. Most of its components were stamped or riveted. The finishing was practically non-existent, and early ones didn't even have serial numbers because that wasn't required until 1968. The cheapness is hard to miss. There's a single barrel band holding the barreled action in place, and the top of the receiver is open, so you have to mount a scope on the side. The trigger is notoriously bad, with little you can do to improve it. The detachable magazines use thin pot metal, so the feed lips can bend easily. The extractor is weak, so you might have to fiddle with the bolt to get a spent case out if the rifle's having a rough day. Weirdly enough, these rifles have become collectible in some circles, especially in certain calibers. People might pay hundreds or even over $1,000 for a decent example because they're scarce and in good shape. If you happen to want a budget Vention bolt gun to tinker with, you could have some fun with the Model 340. You just need to be ready for a finicky design. If you're looking for a reliable shooter that won't drive you up a wall, there are more modern and refined choices available. Sporterized WWII Arisaka. You won't see many Arisaka rifles in modern gun shops, but they're still out there in closets, at estate sales, or on websites that specialize in older firearms. These were Japanese infantry rifles in World War II, mainly the Type 38 in 6.5mm and later the Type 99 in 7.7mm. After the war, American GIs brought plenty home as trophies. Some folks left them in original condition, while others cut down the stocks or changed the sights to turn them into deer rifles. Mechanically, these actions are known to be extremely strong, even though they're simple and not very refined. You can still go out and shoot one if it's in good condition, but there are quirks. The safety is a big round knob at the back of the bolt, and you have to push and twist it to engage. Over time, that safety can wear out and possibly slip when you release it. Some of the last-ditch Type 99 rifles made in Japan's desperate final days are downright unsafe to fire because corners were cut during manufacturing. You definitely shouldn't risk shooting one of those. If you like vintage rifles, there's a certain charm in these Arisakas, especially if you find one that's still close to original. I'm not saying they're completely worthless, just know that a heavily sporterized Arisaka can be crude, and you might run into issues with the worn safety or questionable wartime metallurgy. It's something to approach with caution. Getting a gunsmith to check the chamber and metal integrity is crucial if you insist on shooting one. Most people don't want to deal with that hassle, so they leave them as curios or historical pieces. Winchester Model 100. The Winchester Model 100 can be tempting if you find one selling for $300 or less, but it's not worth it. It's a semi-automatic rifle that showed up in 1961 when Winchester was having quality control nightmares. This rifle wasn't exactly set up to be a lasting success, but it has a sleek, classic look that can still draw you in. The moment you pick one up, you might appreciate its streamlined shape. Unfortunately, that's where the admiration starts to fizzle once you learn about the problems. The trigger is widely regarded as horrible. It's heavy, it's mushy, and no one has found an easy way to improve it. Accuracy isn't much better because the stock is designed in such a way that betting is practically impossible. If you get lucky and find ammo that groups reasonably well, you might breathe a sigh of relief, but this rifle can still be finicky about feeding. The biggest problem is a recall that happened in 1990, linked to a firing pin that could jam. The jam could lead to slam fires when the bolt wasn't locked. The hazard there is obvious. It's not something you can just ignore. Winchester discontinued it in 1973, partly due to a reputation for poor accuracy unreliable feeding, and that dangerous flawed firing pin. Some fans will tell you that the rifle can be tamed if you do this or that. But why bother when there are other semi-auto hunting rifles that don't pose such headaches? Unless you have a soft spot for vintage Winchester designs and don't mind wrangling with potential reliability issues, the Model 100 is a dicey proposition. And those are 8 of the rifles you should never buy. Despite their popularity or history, they all come with some serious drawbacks. Some might catch your eye for their price or reputation, but they've earned their spots on this list for a reason. Which rifle surprised you the most? Sound off in the comments. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more content like this. Thanks for watching.